Hello and welcome to the next instalment of Romance Rendezvous Lockdown with Sharon Sherry. Tonight I am joined by three historical romance writers, Cathleen Ross, Amy Rose Bennett and Maddison Michaels. Ladies, welcome.
Hey.
A little bit about our panel. We're very lucky to have our three ladies tonight. Kathleen has written many books and across different subgenres of romance. She believes that there are many ways an inspiring writer can make it into print and that every writing credit helps build a career. Her mantra, be game, be creative, be brave. Kathleen has certainly followed her own words. Kathleen's first book sold to Random House and became a bestseller in 2001. And she has also written for HarperCollins, Entangled Publishing and several other publishers. Kathleen's latest release is a Scottish Regency called An Unsuitable Lady for a Lord as part of her Scottish Lords and Ladies series for Entangled. Amy Rose Bennett. Amy Rose Bennett wanted to be a writer for as long as she could remember. An avid reader with a particular love for historical romance, it seemed only natural to write stories in her favourite genre. She has a passion for creating emotion-packed and sometimes a little racy stories set in Georgian and Regency periods. Of course, her strong-willed heroines and rakish heroes always find their happily ever after. Amy is happily married to her own alpha male hero, has two beautiful daughters and a rather loopy Rhodesian ridgeback. She has been a speech pathologist for many years, but is currently devoting her time to her one other true calling, writing romance. Amy's latest release is How to Catch an Errant Earl, the second in her disreputable debutante series. Maddison Michaels. Indoctrinated into a world of dashing rogues and feisty heroines when she was a teenager, Maddison Michaels is a best-selling, award-winning Australian romance author who loves to write sexy history with a dash of mystery. Maddison's historical novels are her way of time-travelling back to Victorian London to experience a cornucopia of intrigue, romance and debauchery, all from the comfort of her living room. She lives in Sydney, Australia with her very own handsome hero, beautiful daughter and two fur babies. Oh, and she always starts her day with a cup of liquid gold, coffee. Just quietly, she's addicted to it. Maddison's latest release is The Sinful Scot, book 3 of her Saints and Scoundrels series. Ladies, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'm looking forward to asking you all some questions.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
So, Maddison, we might start with you. What was the first romance novel that you picked up?
I actually picked up a book by Amanda Quick called Deception, and yeah, I loved it. Jared and Olympia's story, it had me hooked straight away. It had intrigue, mystery, romance and a historical setting. So yeah, it really like introduced me to the genre. And from there, I read as many as I could. I went on to Julie Garwood, Julia Quinn, Lisa Clippus, all of those. It was really my first introduction. And I was really lucky actually to meet and become a bit of pals with Jane Ann Krentz actually when you guys held the High Tea Party in 2017, I think it was. So yeah, so to meet my idol was absolutely amazing. So it was really good.
It's one of my favourites too, and she'll be featured as one of the authors in this convention. So I'm speaking to her in a couple of weeks.
She's wonderful. She's just wonderful.
So Amy Rose, what about you?
Look, I actually think it was Jane Eyre. So I hope that's okay to say that. And I was actually quite young. I think I was about 9 years old in grade 4 at primary school, and I was home the school holidays and this movie came on the TV about this governess, and her employer was kind of gruff but charismatic, and there was a mad wife. And I went to the school library and I borrowed the book and I read it from cover to cover, and I'm sure I didn't understand half of it. But that's when I really thought, wow, I just love this, like romance in a historical setting. And, you know, as I got older, I graduated onto Victoria Holt, and I read Jane Austen. But I think like the kind of romances I write now, I didn't actually sort of pick one of those up until I was in my early 20s, and I started to read Joanna Lindsay books and Shirley Busby, all the good old bodice rippers. So, yeah.
Kathleen, we can't leave you out of that. What about you?
I actually read through all of Victoria Holt, just every single one I could get my hands on, and then various Mills and Boons. And then I went to Dimmicks when I was in my 20s, and I said to them, could you recommend a romance? And they looked at me with sort of a funny smile and they said, I'll go over to the black lace counter, there's some romances there. And I didn't know at the time that black lace was, at that time, the most erotic women's fiction. It was the only place that was selling it. So I picked one up and I went home to read it. It was the filthiest, most shocking thing. I was so horrified. It went out in my recycling. I can still remember what it's about, but I'm not going to shock everyone. So then, I don't know why, I decided I would write one. I mean, I've been married 38 years. I haven't had a really adventurous life. But then after, I think obviously the shock, something went into my brain. And the funny thing was I sold my first one and it became a bestseller.
Well, it kicked off something and you didn't.
It wasn't quite romance, but it was a start.
Okay, so Kathleen, what inspired you to start writing? Just that book, or was there something else going on and you decided to?
I just think spiritually you come down and you have goals, and I always wanted to be a romance writer. So I must have just decided that on the other side. I'm sounding quite insane, aren't I? Anyway, so I just started writing in my 20s and I never stopped. And I realised I will never stop. I'll be in my coffin with my fingers going like that. And so that's how I started. And I think I'll always continue. I never really wanted to do anything else.
Well, it's nice that you get to do it then. Maddison, what about you?
I think after reading a lot, I just loved stories and characters, and they just kept coming into my head. So I was like, well, I'm going to start writing. And I actually, back when I was 11 years old, I first entered a writing competition, and that was like a light bulb kind of moment that, wow, I really like writing. But then when I was about 18 and started getting into reading really a lot of romances, I thought, yeah, I would really love to share, you know, these characters and stories. And I mean, let's face it, love is universal. And I think if you can bring a little bit of joy into someone's life through your stories and characters, then that's a really positive contribution to the world. So that's kind of why I started writing, because I wanted to get these stories out and to just spread joy.
What about you, Amy Rose?
I guess like Maddison and Kathleen, I feel like I just am a writer, and I always have been. Ever since childhood, I've had a vivid imagination, and I've always wanted to write stories. Like at primary school, I would draw pictures after, you know, I read a book that I love, like the Moomin Troll series, and I draw pictures and make up my own stories. And yeah, I suppose after Jane Eyre, I think, for me, I knew that I wanted to write historical romance one day. So yeah, that's kind of nothing. I can't think of a particular thing, like an event that kind of said, you know, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. It's just something I always have wanted to do. So yeah.
And here's a question I'll pose to all three of you, because I think our readers will want to know it. We'll start with Amy. What is your series about? The one that we're featuring tonight.
Okay, so the series is called, and I hope I can say it without stuttering, no, here I go, The Disreputable Debutantes. It's quite a mouthful. So this is the first book in the series.
Gorgeous cover.
Promo there. Yeah, it's a gorgeous cover. It's called How to Catch a Wicked Viscount. So that's book one. And basically the series is about, well, the premise for this series is established in this first book. So there are four young women, they're about the age of 18. They're attending a young ladies' academy. And one of the friends, she's a little bit forward thinking, a little bit of a rebel. Her name's Charlie. She decides that to succeed when they have their first season, they need to know a bit more about men than other debutantes do. And she's got a lot of brothers, so she knows a bit about men. So she instigates a late night dawn party. They establish this society called the Society for Enlightened Young Women. And basically they get sprung, drinking brandy and looking at lewd pictures and books. And then there's a big scandal and they're socially disgraced. So the rest of this book and then the other books in the series are basically about, you're a disgraced young woman, how are you going to find a husband? society's doors are closed to you. So each book follows each debutante and how they find their happily ever after with the man of their dreams. So.
Maddison, what about you?
Well, my series is the Saints and Scoundrels series, so kind of speaks for itself in terms of a little bit of what it's about. I think the overall theme, though, is that love will redeem even the most jaded or notorious men and women, regardless of their station in society. So, yeah, it's really following, and like as most books, you know, the Devilish Duke, that's the first one. So rather kind of cute little cover. That's Devlin in that one is a notorious rake who is really not so much of a rake, but he feels that he is, and you know, it takes love for him to actually accept the good inside himself, and it tends to follow that as well. Like my next one, the Elusive Earl, it's more the heroine that doesn't feel that she's quite good enough and that she's deserving of love. So it's really about learning to accept herself and that love can, you know, redeem us all. And the Sinful Scot, it's a bit of both. So yeah, so that's basically the series of the overall theme.
Thank you. And Kathleen?
My series is about, it starts off with a woman who's a blue stocking, and what's interesting, it just came out and I'm getting these several reviews going, oh, she's very modern, but actually she isn't. Women since late 1700s have wanted equality. So my heroine is incredibly outspoken, doesn't want to get married, isn't interested at all, but she falls in love. And in Regency times, what can they do but get married, or their life becomes unlivable. So then there are two other sisters. They're all called the Wilding sisters. Their father was a very fierce lord who died in battle, but he is highly respected in Scotland. And although they've had a slightly wild upbringing, I mean, in terms of sport and archery, and they're very capable women, he's suddenly expecting them to settle down and all find husbands, except guess what? He dies. Oh dear. And so suddenly they have enough money to be in charge of their own destinies.
Love it. Love it. Oh, feisty. Alrighty. So what I might do is, Amy, what is your writing process?
It's kind of haphazard. It depends if I have a deadline or not. As you said in my intro, I do write full time now. Yeah, I kind of need breaks between books. So if I have a deadline, I can write a book quite quickly, but then I find it quite draining. And so I need time to refill my creative well. And I've also realised that I really need a lot of mulling time between books to get my head in the right space for the next lot of characters. So I can write quite quickly, but I do need my kind of space to be creative as well. Yeah, so on a good writing day, I can write 2,000 to 3,000 words, which, you know, is pretty good. I know authors who write a lot more, but that's kind of a good word count for me. Yeah, I'm also quite a plotter. So I really like to know where my book is going, and I have to have basically the whole book worked out in my head before I can put, you know, fingers to keyboard or pen to paper. And I've also found that I do tend to write more efficiently if I handwrite my scenes out first and then type them up. I'm a really terrible typist. I don't know how I've written as many books that I've written, because I'm just like awful. So I think that helps my creative brain, handwriting it, because yeah, my imagination can sort of then take over and then I can get to the mechanics of it afterwards. So yeah, that's kind of my process.
There's a dictation software called Dragon Speaking Naturally. I think you could probably just use one of those and let yourself go.
Possibly, yeah, should look into that.
Maddison, what about you? Both you and Kathleen were nodding throughout Amy's discussion.
Yeah, I can relate a lot to what Amy said. I'm relatively, maybe I would say junior as a author in compared to Amy and Kathleen, but I'm in the middle of my 5th book at the moment, and the process has been very different with each one. So I'm still finding my feet as an author in terms of what works for me. I've found it's changed with every single book that I've written. I am very much a plotter like Amy is, and sometimes with my process, like I also work full time actually, so that's a struggle as well in terms of juggling work, family and writing. And under deadline, I do work really well under a deadline to get things finished, although lately with all the stuff that's been going on in the world, I've been finding it really difficult to get into my writing, and I'm under deadline too, so it's been a bit stressful, but I try and work. I have Friday, Saturday, Sundays off, so I work really long shifts Monday to Thursday, but I try and get my writing done on Friday, Saturday, Sundays. So that is good. I've actually been dabbling with dragon dictation as well, and that is quite amazing. Sometimes I'm in the mood for it though, sometimes I'm not. And I find it really can increase my word count ridiculously if I can get the words out with the dictation. I'm very visual though, so I need to have the words in front of me as I'm dictating, so that I can see them, and then I can make little changes as I go, because it's not always 100% accurate. But yeah, so I mean, at the moment, I'm trying to stay in a routine. I always plot my books as best as I can first, and then I get stuck into writing them. So ideally, I try, when I'm actively writing, trying to do about 10,000 words a week. So sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I have to try and do, 30,000 words in a weekend because I'm really behind. Anyway, that's sometimes I can write really fast if I have to, other times not so much. So yeah, it's a bit of a work in progress.
Given that you have a series, do you have a series Bible that kind of keeps everybody and all the characters straight in your head?
Well, I do for this next series I'm writing. So I'm writing a new series, and it's a 3-book series that Entangled have under contract. And yeah, I've had to, because I've learnt with my last series, I had to keep going back and looking, what were their eye colours from past secondary characters? What was this? What was that? What happened there? So I had to keep going back to my other works. Whereas I thought, right, for this one, I'm going to keep a Bible and I'm going to put everything down. I kind of have, maybe I'm about 80% there with keeping track of it all. So that has helped a lot. Yeah.
Great. Kathleen, what about you?
I write for Entangled as well, and my editor insists that I have the whole series plotted out. Doesn't have to be step by step, but I should know what each is doing. And it can change. She's open to change. When I'm writing for myself, so what I start off with when I'm writing a book for a publisher, when I'm under contract, I might only be writing 500 words a day initially until I know my people. And then I get to about halfway and I know them, and then my word count just goes up to 1,000, 1,500 a day. I should also say that I edit for a living, so funny enough, I made a lot of friends through my editing and I really enjoy it, a lot of writing friends. And I also do a little bit of coaching and talks for libraries, a little bit of this. I'm always being asked to do all sorts of things and podcasts. So there are various interruptions. Plus, I've also got a lovely and gorgeous Italian husband, but he wants my company and now he wants me to play golf with him. So it's just trying to find that balance, because I know that I would actually quite happily work 7 days a week and into the night if I could get away with it. So it's just finding that kind of balance. When I write for myself though, when I'm not under contract, I'm often reading, I go and read, when it's a historical, I'll go and read primary texts first. My university degree, my first one, is in history. I will spend sometimes years on research. So while I was doing the Entangled contracts, whenever I got a moment, I'd jump into a book I was just writing for myself, which now, funnily enough, is the one that's got an agent and being sent around the bigger publishing houses. So you just don't know what happens. And then those I start slowly. I kind of have a plan, but other things happen and they surprise me. So I guess I have 2 systems. I can write into the mist or I can plot, depending on what's needed.
Okay. So, Maddison, how do you research your novels?
I have some really great books. I find with non-fiction, I have to have hard copies. I'm just a bit funny like that. Like with fiction, I love my e-reader, but non-fiction, I have some really cool books all about, you know, Victorian era, Regency, etc. And so I try to delve into those. Obviously, as I'm writing, there'll be bits that come up that I think, oh, I need to look into that more. I need to find out about that. So luckily with, you know, this day and age, I use the internet a great deal. So yeah, that's basically how I do research. I head to my books. You can probably see some of them behind here. And yeah, actually I've got a really great London poverty maps book a little while ago. It's my favourite. It's got these historical maps from the 1860s to 1880s in London. It's amazing. So yeah, I head to the books to research.
Do you ever ask your readers for help?
Not really. I tend to find that there's most things you can find nowadays online, and I probably tend to go more to my writing pals as opposed to readers for like research questions. Although having said that, some of my readers are so ridiculously knowledgeable, it's amazing. But yeah, sometimes I'll ask them for little things to see what their thoughts are, but not often. So yeah.
Amy, how important is historical accuracy in your novels, and how important is it for you?
Oh, look, it's super important. And I think with each book I've written, I've become more diligent. I think historical romance readers, and particularly Regency romance readers, are really, really savvy. They know a lot of the history as well. And if you get something wrong, they're not afraid to call you out on it. So yeah, I do a lot of research. I'm just thinking about my latest release, How to Catch an Errant Earl. You know, aside from my nose being in a dictionary all the time, because you really have to be careful of the words and phrases you use as in the Regency era. Yeah, so I'm always looking up those things in the dictionary. But you know, aside from knowing about the social etiquette and the consequences of breaking the rules of the time, I should have showed my pretty book before, How to Catch an Errant Earl. I did a lot of research into orphanages and medical practices at the time, because my heroine in this book, her name's Miss Arabella Jardine. She's quite a blue stocking, and she wants to open her own orphanage one day. And yeah, so I was researching things like laudanum addiction and how to how to fix a dislocated shoulder. You know, the first ever stethoscope that came out. So yeah, you can really go down, you know, rabbit holes following different research topics. And yeah, online resources are wonderful. I found a wonderful PDF academic article about early medical clinics in Regency era London. They were called dispensaries. So yeah, it can take quite a bit of time to sort of ferret out all of that information, but I love history, so for me it's part of the fun of the writing process.
It's not like it's hard work. Now, Kathleen, you've written very different types of stories. What ultimately drew you to writing a historical series?
I self-published a historical Highland series, and I've actually been writing historicals for years. I just haven't written them for a publisher. They've been like my own pleasure. And then as my mother's become very elderly now, she's 93, and she always said to me, the Rosses were someone in that hoity-toity English voice. And of course, being Australian, I went, ha, 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 until I started looking at Jeannie and seeing where they came from. And then I realised my mother is a direct descendant of the Ross Lords. And when one of them was arrested by Cromwell and put in the Tower and died, his brother, which is my direct ancestor, went off to Ireland and married a daughter of an earl, and on we go. And so I found it was really funny. I was writing and studying the history of my own family. And one day I was asleep and a voice was talking to me. So at that stage, it was a dream, telling me all about the Black Douglas, and I had no idea who he was, but the voice, I woke up and the voice was still talking to me for a while. So I realized I was channeling someone, I don't know who. And then I researched the Black Douglas and I wrote a whole series because he was a real person and he was a friend of Robert the Bruce. And then I went recently last year on an Alison Weir tour into Scotland, looking at all the lands and why Culloden happened, the Battle of Culloden. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I know those names. And then I looked in my family tree, and again, a Ross had married the sister of one of the Fraser lords. So I was again studying my own ancestors. So there's a lot of stuff going on for me as I'm reading and studying. The more I do it, I realize I'm actually studying my own people and writing about them too.
So this is possibly, I think, given all of your women are very, very strong, we often read in non-fiction that women were often just goods and chattels in the time periods for your books, and often not empowered, but all of your women are. Do you think that women like your heroines existed in the time, or have you imposed modern freedoms on characters in another age? I'll start with Maddison on that one.
A bit of both. I think definitely there were strong women back then. I mean, why else would there be so many rules and, you know, regulations around their behaviour if there weren't some that didn't play up occasionally? So, yeah, I think there were definitely strong women, and it was just more that the constraints of society at the time were basically, you know, caging them. So I think my stories, yeah, my heroines are very strong. And, yeah, sometimes they do things that it might not necessarily have been done, like the heroine in my first book, she climbs a tree at a ball, but that's her persona and her character, so I had to be true to that. But yeah, so there's a little bit of artistic liberty in some of the stuff I do, but I definitely think that they existed. And I think to say that they didn't, that's not giving enough credit to the women of the time.
Amy, what do you think?
I think we need to write strong female characters so modern readers can relate to them. And I think in part we can get away with that as long as our heroines know what the rules were and they make the decision to break the rules. So I think you can get away with a lot as long as your heroine knows, yeah, if she does agree to have a passionate fling with a Raquel, what are going to be the consequences and how can she best hide that affair? So I think there have always been strong women with desires like we modern women have. It's just that, like Maddison was saying, there were all these rules imposed about them. But that didn't mean they didn't try and escape those cages. And I think, yeah, as you're writing these stories, you have to include the rules and then show how the heroine's going to break it, knowing that she's breaking it and what might happen because of that.
Great, thank you. Now, I've realised we have 5 minutes left of our time, and what I'd like to discuss with all of you is what is your next book? When is it due out? And, you know, is there anything you can tell our readers in advance? So I might start with Kathleen for that one, and then we'll go to...
I was walking the Battle of Culloden last year with a battle historian, which was lovely. But as I was walking, actually having my feet on the land, I heard a story, as I do, because that's the way I get my stories, in this odd way, about a lord who'd fought for one side, fought for the English, and a Fraser lady who was, of course, on the side of the Scottish. And a whole lot of other historical things came to me, some of them because I do an Alison Weir tour every year. I mean, Alison will come up with all sorts of fascinating facts that you just don't really read in print. You don't get them anywhere. You go on her doors and all sorts of stuff comes to life. So that's what I'm focusing. I'm just doing it for myself at the moment because I get incredibly passionate about it and I can sit and just do it in my own time without a deadline.
Nice. Maddison, what about you?
So I'm working on my next series and it's set a bit later in time, in the late 1800s. So there's a little bit more freedom with what women could do then. and it's about three really strong women, very unconventional women, who one of they're all best friends from when they went to a finishing school. One of their other friends apparently committed suicide, and because she'd been seduced and abandoned by a scoundrel. So they've decided enough is enough. They're going to start publishing a gazette that's going to list in detail bachelors and their virtues or their deficiencies, and they're going to stop, or try and stop as best as they can, this from ever happening again. But all of my books tend to have a bit of suspense and mystery as well, because I love to add that subplot in them. So the first book is also about finding out that the friend didn't actually kill herself, she was murdered. So it's also finding the murderer story. So yeah, so very strong female characters, heroines in my books, all with unconventional paths.
Sounds like loads of fun. And Amy, what about you?
In September, sorry. So, yeah.
Oh, good, great, thank you. Amy, what about you?
Yeah, the third book in my disreputable debutante series is called How to Catch a Sinful Marquess, and it's due out on the 25th of August. And it's got the most gorgeous cover. I can't wait till it comes out. It's just got a gorgeous mauve gown, and I love it. But it's about one of the debutantes who gets expelled. Her name's Olivia de Vere, and she's an heiress with a stutter. So it was interesting writing a stuttering heroine. Anyway, she's got a dastardly cousin who wants to marry her for her money, and she ends up on without giving too much away, a road trip to the Isle of Skye with the hero of the piece. His name's Hamish, Lord Slate, and he's got an eye patch. He was wounded at the Battle of Waterloo. So it's a bit of a Beauty and the Beast, woman in peril road trip kind of a mashup. So yeah, I think it's a lot of fun.
Well, I've just found my next lot of reading, ladies. Thank you so much. Just before we go, for our treasure hunters, I would like to ask you to hold up your treasure hunter sheet, and Kathleen will read out her number. A little bit closer, please, Maddison, and up a bit. That's it. Perfect. And Kathleen, your number?
09567345.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Ladies, I'd like to really thank you for your time and your generosity with information and letting your readers in a little tonight. And thank you so much. Don't forget, ladies who are watching, visit all of our lovely writers on their websites, get to know their books, buy their books, follow them on social media. And we look forward to this airing under Romance Rendezvous lockdown later in the year. Thank you all very, very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you, girls.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.